And it's those operators that think holistically about how they can create for themselves a brand that is hospitality forward, that does respect all three legs of hospitality and healthcare and real estate. Those are the ones that I think are going to stand out in the next 5 years in this industry.
Tips from Trestle is brought to you by Wizox AI, Advantage Trust GPO, the Dining with Dementia Workshop, and the 100% Leader.
Welcome to Tips from Trestle, the Senior Living Food and Hospitality Podcast. This podcast explores the senior living industry with a unique focus on food, hospitality, and the community experience. I'm your host, Aaron Fish. My goal for this podcast: educate, inform, and inspire leaders in senior living. How? By bringing the resident and customer experience to the front of mind in our industry. We should bring the passionate spirit of food and hospitality to everything that we do and everyone we serve each and every day. So what are we waiting for? Let's get to it.
I think there's a real cost to the residents with that kind of idea or that resistance to hospitality as well.
Yeah. No, that's a good point. It's the difference is healthcare and real estate. You can put hard quantitative KPIs to it, like a census number. How many meds were passed? What was our call light time? What's our NOI? What's our CapEx budget? There are numbers that are hard that go to all of that. Hospitality becomes a little more qualitative, a little more squishy. And, if you're sitting in a corporate office and you're trying to manage 30 communities, those are numbers that are harder to experience not being present. So I don't think it's an intentional thing. I think it's just understanding, hey, you've got to be better about capturing the qualitative metrics and understanding what are the things that impact that so much.
Yeah, and I think something else that kind of lends to this is you've mentioned before that community is definitely a softer, nicer word versus facility. And I mean, what thoughts do you have about that and kind of redefining what not just the word, but the spaces themselves as well?
Yeah, no, it's funny because the idea, I mean, I still work with people. I still hear people use the word facility. I hear still them use the word building because that's that healthcare, that real estate forward model. Again, these are some really great people doing great work in the industry that say this. I think the language around community is in the right direction. It is correct in the narrative of we want to create a community. We want to create a space where we can do all of these things. And so I think the word community is right. Where I think people get the word community wrong is how they mention it. You even said something earlier about like this is a resident's home,
Yeah.
which is very much like when we say the word community, when people talk about this as an industry, that is how they talk about it. That's how they use the word community. And I, inside a little part of me cringes a little bit because I know the word community is right. We just use it in the wrong way. And what I mean by that is people will say, oh, well, the dining room this is their dining room. It's their home dining room. So when they come here, we want to be able to give them whatever they want and make them feel comfortable. And this is where they want to live. And that's honestly a mistake. And what I mean by that is, and chefs say this all the time to me, that they have their EDs tell them this, and they're like, we can't do that, right? When you give me an 8 or a 9 or a $10 PRD, that's not possible. It's not feasible. I need
Right.
like a 13, 14, $18 PRD to give them what they want. The way we have to think about a senior living community is that it is a community in like the bigger sense of the word, right? So take your local community, right? So I live in, I'll use Keller, Texas, and that's the school district I live in. So Keller, Texas is a community, right? It has neighborhoods, it has shops, it has common spaces, it has all of these things that people can do. And that's how we have to look at a senior living physical community, as it is a city under a roof. right? So the apartment is your single family home. And the hallway that they live on is kind of like their neighborhood. The hallway is like that communal street, right? Like people
Mhm.
can come gather on the cul-de-sac or at the corner in the seating area, right? And then when we start thinking about the common spaces, those are the third spaces that we think about as a bigger community, right? So you have a library, you have a game room, you have a chapel. These are all just scaled down versions of the exact same thing in our community. And so how that translates when you go into a dining room is that it's a restaurant or the country club that we can go to and get meals and experience that. And that's where the difference is, right? We're able to, in that restaurant, define a menu, define a service, define what that experience looks like. And it is not your home dining room. Your home dining room table is the one that's in your apartment.
Mhm.
That's where you experience in your home dining. In a community, our dining room is a restaurant. I don't even like the word restaurant style because I was telling somebody that's another person in the industry who's at the corporate level and in the food and dining aspects of it. And it's putting lipstick on a pig when you say restaurant style. Again, because what I hear when you say restaurant style is you are doing healthcare and institutional food, but you're dressing it up to
Mhm.
be a restaurant experience. Just skip that step and just make it a restaurant experience. It's better for your PRDs, which sounds crazy, but it is. You get a better experience. You get fresher food. The way you approach it, the types of people and personalities you can bring in to do that work change and they shift when you say, oh, this is the Oak Room at ABC Senior Living, not this is our ABC Senior Living dining room. Just even a simple shift like that makes a huge difference. And so when I think about the word community, that's how I approach that word. And I think our industry needs to start thinking about it that way.
Yeah, and there's kind of a paradox there too, because I've heard you say that your biggest pushback from operators is that putting those standardized service elements is it's taking away from the home feeling, but you kind of argue that standards actually make hospitality better. Is that true?
Yeah. I always describe a kitchen. I'll use the kitchen as an example because it's the easiest one to do this. A kitchen is both art and science, right? So science is like a tested, formulated process that you have to follow, right? And so think of the kitchen as like a manufacturing plant, right? If you want to produce the meal that is high quality, you got to follow the right standards, you got to follow the right procedures. And so cooking salmon, getting the right plate, all of those pieces of the puzzle have to happen. That's where the standards happen, right? A place setting at a table, that's a standard that has to be met. The lighting, the sounds, there are base standards that you can put in place for all of that. But where I think people get confused is they think, again, back to the qualitative hospitality is squishy, it's this warm, fuzzy thing. No, it's built on that foundation of standards and processes. And then you add the flair and the extra on top of it, right? So it's the language you train on and use, right? It's how do we greet a table? How do we make somebody feel? What are the flexible areas where we can do that? Do we use uh, how do we set the table? Is it just rolled silverware thrown on there, or do you have it set properly? Do you have a nice placemat? Do you have a folded napkin? Again, there's a standard there, but how you develop the standard and how you stack those all together, then create that experience. And that's how you not only keep a standard and how you create a successful operation. That's also how you elevate the experience, right? Because if you have a standard, you can then hold your team to a standard that's already elevated, that's already there, right? We know that if you just let Joe cook the salmon on Tuesday and then Fred is going to cook it on Friday, and you don't give them a recipe, the whole thing is going to fall apart, And when we build menus for clients, when we talk about how do you build out a calendar for a resident engagement program with clients and prospects, we use similar language, right? Like our activity calendars and resident engagement programming, we've developed a tool that we call the engagement guide sheet that is literally a recipe to execute our activity well. And it has more than just like, it's bingo, it's at 3 o'clock, it's in the library, and this is where the supplies are. There's a lot more to that. We talk about different aspects. How do you communicate? How do you engage? How do you adjust for acuity if you're in assisted living or memory care? These are all elements to creating a better experience for that activity. But it doesn't happen unless we have that standard in place of that engagement guide sheet.
Yeah, definitely. I think those standards are actually uplifting your staff and allowing them to be better hosts rather than constraining them and putting them in a box. So that's
Exactly.
excellent. I know also kind of going back to the dining side of things, operators sometimes see dining as a cost center to minimize. But can you tell me how you see it as a primary decision driver for new residents? They're really looking into that overall dining experience, and that's an important piece for them. Can you walk us through that kind of both on the financial side and just kind of the overall, as you say, squishy and nice side?
You're right. Operators, dining is always a cost. It's an expense to be controlled. It's
Uh-huh.
food's second highest expense line after labor in a senior living community. And so I understand the thinking there, right? That's part of the reason I mentioned earlier, like the running it like a restaurant. Restaurants aren't not for profit businesses, right? They're there to make money. So they understand how to do that. So there are definitely some ways that and approaches to managing the expense side, but to not think of it as a way to drive revenue is, I think, a short-sighted vision, right? And so I recently put together a proposal for someone, and we were talking about helping them build out their corporate hospitality program. And I just did some quick analysis because I was like, this is always a hard sell for the C-suite, right? Because again, it's squishy. Oh, you say hospitality, but what are the hard bottom line facts and figures? There were three areas that when I did this quick research, I looked at. It was occupancy, length of stay, and turnover, staff turnover. Those are numbers and KPIs that literally every person is latch onto. They're like, I understand those. That makes sense
Yes.
to me. So when you elevate the experience using hospitality, creating standards, and being better at that, we think about, okay, well, what kind of impact can that have? So I did this this is a portfolio of 28 communities. If they increased their occupancy across 28 communities by 0.5%, we're talking 8 more apartments across the portfolio of 28 communities. That's an annual revenue impact of $430,000. That's a very conservative estimate. If it's 1%, it's almost $1 million. If you get 2%, and this is optimistic, right? But if you really blow it out the doors,
Mhm.
it's 34 unit across 28 communities. That's less than 3 additional units per community. It's almost a $2 million bottom line impact on revenue. So these are hard facts of like, this is the math, right? Length of stay is the same way. If I can prevent 5 move outs from happening at 30 days, right? I'm thinking a 30-day extension. They're going to happen, right? But if I can keep somebody 30 days longer in 5 apartments per community in that portfolio, it's another $650,000 in annual revenue impact. And then the turnover, which we know turnovers, if we just are in a high turnover industry, right? We're talking 35 to 65%, depending upon the position. A 10% reduction in turnover, that's about $250,000. So when you start to add all of this up, we're talking $1 million in occupancy, 630 in length of stay, another 250 in staff retention. This is that moderate impact of having a strong hospitality program, elevating that experience. That's $2 million annually in revenue for an operator. That's not chump change. That is a significant amount of money that makes investors really, really happy. And one other piece that I'll share, because the real estate component often gets overlooked in this conversation. And I had the fortunate experience of sitting with a client during a community transition where I was on site with them transitioning this property into their portfolio. And we were talking about how we redesigned their dining program for them on how they were going to collect revenues and how we were going to build that out. And sitting there with that CEO and the ED and the culinary director, he was talking about the impact that revenue was going to have on the asset value. And I think this is where those owners, investment groups, they understand the math I'm about to explain, but they don't understand the impact of something like this ancillary revenue. A $5,000 monthly increase in revenue for a community that has 100 units, we're talking $50 a unit, right? That's not a lot of additional revenue. At a 6% cap rate, that's $1 million increase in the value of that asset. Simply by generating a little bit more revenue from better food, better dining experience, having a beverage program, even a basic beverage program, offering wine and beer and spirits, things of that nature. Yes, there's always a little bit of liability with that, but think about families that come in. Think about the length of stay that helps create. Think about how many more apartments you can sell by having that. So there's a huge revenue impact to having an elevated experience in your community. And I don't think we talk about that enough. And it's something that even myself and Trestle needs to do a better job of explaining to the industry as a whole.
Yeah, because those opportunities are there. The assets are there, just learning how to better utilize those, definitely.
Exactly.
I know I personally, when we have this conversation in my head, I've been imagining the independent living dining rooms and but often memory care. And I've heard you say that memory care dining is one of the most neglected areas in senior living. I think a lot of that is due to budget, but what systematic changes do you think need to happen in memory care to kind of elevate the experience there as well?
First things first, it has to be treated the same as independent living, right? There seems to be this sort of mindset. I see it with the first place I always see it is in budgets, right? You'll have an independent living program that's running the same PRD on maybe a continental and one meal a day program as a memory care that is 3 meals a day plus two snack offerings. Now that's a dramatically different program. And the thinking is that we got to offer all these choices because these people are independent. And if we don't offer all these choices, they'll leave us. And in memory care, we just got to make sure the food is hot and edible. And they're there because they need the care. And I think the mistake is thinking that they're there because they only need healthcare support, right? They need the nutritional support. If the food is average or mediocre, they're not going to eat it. I don't care how progressed they are in their disease. Food is this visceral, emotional, long-term memory thing, right? I was telling the story about being very, very young. I was probably 6, 7, 8. It was before it was literally, I remember because I was in second grade. We had just moved to a new house, a new city. My grandmother was living with us at the time. And every morning, she didn't make the bread from scratch. She's probably rolling in her grave now that I'm sharing this little secret. But it was the frozen Schwann's bread that you had to defrost and proof and bake.
Uh-huh.
And so she found that she's like, I could in my 70s make bread from scratch, or this product's really good. It's pretty close to homemade. I'm going to
Yeah,
do this
still
every morning
process.
for my family. So I remember every morning waking up with this bread in the oven, just baking and filling the house with the smell. To this day, like I can close my eyes and visualize the kitchen, the dining room, the smell, like the whole experience
Uh-huh.
was, I'm sad to say, 40 years ago, that experience happened to me. So
But
think
it's
about
stuck with you.
what I
Yeah.
just described for every person living in your memory care. How do you recreate that for them? Because they will have that reaction. Food is a full sensory experience. The sense that you use the least when eating is your taste. I know that sounds crazy, but it's really truly the case. We see, we smell, we hear, like all of that is just as, if not more important than the taste of the food. So we have to take memory care and elevate it the same way as we're trying to do with all of our independent living products.
That's fantastic. And I think you cover some of that in your Dining with Dementia workshop.
Yeah, that started as I did a section at a conference as a, hey, can you help us? Our speaker backed out. And the moment of doing that turned into, this is a huge opportunity to convince this industry that this is an area where we need to lean into. Memory care is important. We have a lot of people out there doing a lot of great work. I'll shamelessly plug Carrie Alberts, the dementia darling, because she's my partner at the workshop. She does a lot of great work, but there are tons and tons of people out there doing great work around this idea of creating a different experience in memory care. We just happen to be the ones looking at the dining aspect and how that can be such a elevated opportunity to improve the lives of those residents.
That's great. I've kept you pretty long here, but this is all stuff you're passionate about. So
I'm a
I'll
talker, so
just
yeah, let's wrap this up before I keep
I'll leave you
going.
with one more question here. So what do you look for in operators when you're looking for somebody to work with that shows you that they're ready to genuinely elevate the experience, like you've said?
They don't look at it in a black and white and red experience. And what I mean by that is they're not always just looking at the financial piece of it. I promised an operator that I am super aware of that. I lived my last 20 years in senior living doing that. I work for clients now and I have just as many conversations around managing food cost and setting budgets and building labor models that are efficient as I do about how do we create this dining experience? How can you help us rebrand our property in Norman, Oklahoma? This is a project we worked on to where it fits the community, right? Where we created, this pains me to say this as somebody who despises the Oklahoma Sooners, it was a fully University of Oklahoma adjacent branding program. We had a bar, we had dining rooms, we had elevated experiences all around that theme. And so doing all of that, there was an expense to that. It's the operator that knows there's a little bit of that, but I know there's going to be a return on this investment in some way, shape, or form. And maybe it's not immediately direct, right? Like this person, yeah, maybe we can come in and help you with your food costs, and we will, and we do. But at the same time, we also think about, well, if we can save you 25 cents overall on your PRD, and I can add 3 rooms in revenue, that is the 1-2 punch. And it's those operators that think holistically about how they can create for themselves a brand that is hospitality forward, that does respect all 3 legs of hospitality and healthcare and real estate. Those are the ones that I think are going to stand out in the next 5 years in this industry. And they're the ones that truly understand what I'm talking about when I say elevate the experience.
That's great. I thank you for sharing with me today and for everything that you're doing in senior living for our seniors and raising that experience for them. So thanks, Aaron.
Yeah, thank you for turning the tables. I
Yeah,
appreciate it.
absolutely.
So there it is, everybody. Another one in the books. Thanks again for tuning in. Please follow, like, and subscribe on YouTube, Spotify, Apple, or wherever you get your podcasts. And be sure to follow us on social media at Tips from Trestle. You can also learn more about the work I do by following me on LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram, and even TikTok. And be sure to check out Trestle Hospitality Concepts at www.trestlehospitalityconcepts.com. I'm your host, Aaron Fish, and this has been another episode of Tips from Trestle.